Thank you. Okay, Nikhil.
Sounds good. All right, great. Well, welcome everyone, and wanted to again thank everyone, especially for all the folks who are at the AWS event and are stepping away to log into this. Truly appreciate your attendance and dedication. Well, we have our May conversation scheduled, and let me just quickly walk through the agenda. Some of you may already know from our December summit, and if you all logged into Gov Chats in April about Josiah's work in the state of Vermont. And Josiah was very kind to agree to come and talk to us about Vermont's AI journey. And they have been doing this for a while now, and they have gone through some significant achievements, including setting a similar council in Vermont at a very early stage of their AI work and program. So I requested Josiah, and Josiah agreed to share some of the things and walk through how they went about doing these things. So that will be very helpful to understand their AI journey. Then we have a quick update on, well, update of the things in process for the innovation lab, which I would like to share with you all and maybe get some feedback. You probably saw an email come about the AI, responsible AI use standard. So we can talk a little more about it, but just as a context, this was put together in the response to us having some guidelines because few agencies were looking for it. And now that we are in a pretty, I would say, better matured state of understanding how the overall governance framework should work, I would like to revisit that. And it would be great to have some feedback, and then we can work on it with you offline, or identify some milestones to have a common discussion. And then we will open this for open the rest of the time for our internal discussion here. So without further ado, let me introduce Josiah. Like I said, he is the Chief AI and Data Officer with the state of Vermont. And Josiah, welcome, and thank you again so much for agreeing to talk to us. Do you have a slide deck or any presentation?
Yeah, I have some slides. So yeah, I'll steal the screen share if that's okay.
Absolutely. I'll start.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me see if I can do this. Share the screen, and then here, let me move some stuff around so that I can still see you while I'm doing this. Let me, there you go, full screen mode. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to, yeah, as Nikhil said, I'm really excited to be here. Nikhil and I have been working on AI stuff for a long time, swapping a lot of notes. I've been following the work that's been going on in Georgia, especially around the lab. Looks like really cool stuff, and I'm really excited to have this opportunity to come share some of what we've been doing in Vermont with you all. I guess a little bit of framing. Our AI Council was spun up our initial version of this was an AI task force spun up in 2018. At that point, I, as a kind of developer, was dabbling with some AI tools at our Agency of Transportation and kind of in one of the embedded teams there. And the state was kind of just getting its toes into what does it mean to build AI systems and how are those different from normal IT systems. And so the state was concerned about a lot of things. Vermont's pretty rural, strong agricultural sector, strong tourism sector, and wanted to know how AI was going to affect our workforce across the state as well as within state government. And so in 2018, they spun up an AI task force to answer those questions. They brought in people from within like technologists from within the state, as well as folks from universities in Vermont and business community, and kind of went through, all right, what's on the horizon? What do we expect? And that task force made a number of recommendations, one of which was to create kind of a more long-term standing council. And they issued their report in, I think it was January of 2020, and no one read it for a year and a half because that's how things were going in January of 2020. And so in 22, the legislature kind of picked that back up and created an AI division within state government and an AI council to oversee and direct what that division did. And so our first deliverables, we didn't have a lot of time for. I think they gave us 8 months or something to come up with a code of ethics and an inventory of all the AI systems being used. So I was appointed as the director of the AI division and worked with the council on the code of ethics and worked with my team within the Agency of Digital Services on coming up with the inventory. And we refreshed that inventory every year and provided some feedback and made some adjustments. And I think that the inventory was in some ways harder than we expected because AI is kind of a free add-on or it's appearing in systems that we've had for a long time. So there's a lot of, whatever vendor we use this system from just rolled out a new set of AI capabilities. Now that has to go into the AI inventory and kind of working through that. It's been less about we're building or procuring AI systems and more about sometimes we still do that and those show up in the inventory, but more about identifying the systems that are already in place that are getting new AI capabilities. By 23, we issued our data management and implementation guidelines. Those came out at the very end of 23. And we've got a lot in there kind of operationalizing the principles that we put forward in the code of ethics. And then in this year in 24, it looks like the legislature is going to be expanding our council because they've been very happy with the work so far. They're going to expand it to include data privacy. And we really see data privacy as the main regulatory hook that government can have into AI. And you're seeing that on the federal side too, with the executive order. It's a lot about the data and what data is being used and what kinds of decisions that can be used to make. So that's the approach we're taking as well. And looking forward to seeing how the session shapes out and exactly what that looks like over the next couple of weeks. But that's kind of high level our journey and how we got to where we are today. Any questions on this, or shall I dive into a little bit more about what the council does and how it like operations goes?
Good.
Okay, I'll keep going then. So I'm going to jump down to here's our council. So you can see the directive and statute there. I think the main thing that I wanted to point out is that we actually have relatively few nerds on our council. It's kind of a little bit more wonk heavy and a little bit less nerd heavy. And that's been valuable for us because what we have found is that that diversity of perspective really helps us to identify things that could be either confusing or break processes. You know, when we're thinking about we shouldn't use artificial intelligence to do automated like denials of things. When we make a statement like that, the folks with more of a kind of a security background will be like, wait a minute, we're going to automatically block people trying to come into our firewall all the time. So how do we structure that requirement so that we can say like, yeah, not benefits programs, not consequential decisions, but like if it's a transient impact or something that's easily reversible, then that would be okay. And so we're able to kind of hone those conversations in that way. What our council meetings look like, I generally for every topic, I should say we generally meet monthly. Once in a while we'll have a meeting kind of in the middle, but usually it's monthly. And most topics we'll address in 3 sessions. So if it's a new topic that we're trying to grapple with, like we were talking about election deepfakes earlier this year, we'll start the first session as just kind of an open discussion about, how are people thinking about this? And, I'll often prepare like a little bit of an overview of kind of where the current state of things is across the industry. But then we'll dive into particular points in the next session after I've gotten, session 1, a lot of open discussion. I'll get feedback where people are thinking, kind of rough in what we think our approach is going to be. I'll take that back. And then in session 2, I'll go into particular points that either I think we need to flesh out more, or I need more clarity on, or we need to like hash out how are we going to kind of overlay these 2 perspectives and come to some consensus. And then in the third session, I'll have it, it's a lot of document-based stuff. So I'll have the kind of final draft or near final draft of what that's going to look like, or whatever our recommendation is, whoever that's going to go to. And we'll review and fine tune that and then issue it out. So this approach works pretty well. And, we'll review things periodically if the situation changes, or if somebody raises that, hey, we talked about this some time ago and my thinking has changed on that, or there's a new thing in industry that's coming out or whatever, we'll go back and revisit things. But once we've kind of gone through this process, the council's recommendations are generally addressed to either the legislature as a proposal for policy or a response to a particular bill that's on the wall, or it'll be addressed to our CIO for her to create as a standard for use within state government or across state government and our contractors. So those are kind of the 2 directions output tends to go. Sometimes there's other types of output like public education materials and things like that. But for the most part, we've been focused so far on a lot of policy related work formally. And then our members will be engaged informally with lots of other kind of educational organizations. So I can talk about that more in a minute, but I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or any feedback.
So Josiah, the topics you guys cover, is that all just in-house, or did you guys get topics from a legislator to say, hey, I need your opinion on this, or is it just you guys bring that stuff to them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Initially, the legislature kind of laid out, here's what we want you to be focused on in 23, here's what we want you to be focused on in 24. They kind of like gave us that structure of, and it was pretty broad. It was like code of ethics covering some of these types of things, operational guidance covering some of these types of things. And then beyond that, yeah, if a legislator reaches out, or if we see something on the wall that's AI related, we'll kind of proactively pick that up and start discussing it. And so that we're ready and we're not like 3 months after they ask a question before we can answer it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I guess just a follow up.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Anthony. Go ahead.
All right. So just to follow up on that discussion, when you provide the proposals back, legislation, how does that back and forth work? Is it you guys have like a formal time that you present to them, or is it just kind of all email? How does that back and forth work with you all?
Yeah, it depends on what type of feedback they're looking for. If it's more formal, we'll like give a memo, and it'll be on letterhead, and it'll say like memo on blah blah, and we'll write down our points. Otherwise, it might be like our legislature is pretty open, so like I can reach out to somebody and go sit in the cafeteria and chat with them and be like, hey, we talked about this with the council. This is how we're thinking about this. And that might be more of a verbal, informal conversation. But one thing that's been super valuable with the council in those informal conversations is the council is a body that's not directly part of the executive branch. So we can provide feedback and ideas through the council, and it doesn't necessarily carry behind it the threat of a veto if they don't do it. So it does allow us to have a little bit more informal conversation and do a little bit more shaping, and also like not be as, I don't know, like when I come to the legislature and speak as the administration, it's a little bit of a different role than when I come and speak on behalf of the council. And it tends to be a little bit of a friendlier conversation. And we'll also invite the legislators like, hey, come to our next session. We'd love to go through this more with you. And we've had some legislators take us up on that.
Thank you, Josiah.
Just a follow-up to the actual topics of those, like the guidelines that they have shared with you, like how high level are those typically? And then based on the back and forth, like have you ever had a reason to kind of reset some of those based on what is happening around, or how fast-paced things are changing, or is it high enough? Like, for example, you mentioned about like the ethical code. So is it like high enough that you can actually have some better definition in what you're working on and your focus areas?
Yeah, I think I have a picture of some of the key points. Yeah, so this is like the guts of our code of ethics, where we landed. I think the guidance that we got was as broad as a code of ethics talking about how AI will be used responsibly in Vermont. Like I think it was about that broad. I can get you the statute language, but it was pretty general. When they bring us a bill, it's much more like, here's a policy proposal, right? And then there's a lot more like detail back and forth that we do. We recently had a deep porn bill that we were providing some input on, and that was like very specific. And we had things like, this language like talks about videos, like you also need to think about still images, right? Like we were able to kind of provide some very detailed technical feedback. So I guess it varies, and I don't know if I actually answered your question, but hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah. Now we're just trying to get a sense of like how is it just like very nebulous from a direction perspective that they convey, but this is a good example of the granularity I was looking for.
Yeah, so the asks do tend to be more on the nebulous side. There's relatively few like fully formed statute proposals, and relatively more like grand broad things. And I think our council likes, like, we enjoy operating in kind of the broader, more nebulous space. We kind of like it's a lot of work for me, and I'm assuming Nikhil, you're going to run into the same thing. Like it's a lot of work for me to kind of do the legwork and be able to focus the conversation and get useful input. There's one thing I want to show this. So this was like just an example of something we worked on. This was our guidance for generative AI use by state employees. And this was my third attempt at presenting this. The first two were much less clear and worked for me as I don't know, as whatever I am, but like they were the normal humans, even normal humans who know a lot about AI couldn't understand what I was trying to convey. And so the council was able to give me that feedback that like, oh, okay, I kind of see what you're going for. What if you do this? And then like eventually it was like, wait, this is all I need is this table. This will make it clear. And this is still complicated, but it's kind of a complicated topic, and it like now the complexity accurately reflects the complexity of what's underneath. So we've got, I'm not showing this as like, this is how you should structure your usage of generative AI, but I am showing it as an example of the kinds of outputs that we were able to create with the council.
Cool. Thank you.
I'll throw a couple other things on that I think might be helpful resources. This is one, our priorities for AI use. Being able to characterize, like, as a state, this is what we're focused on right now. These are really broad, right? These are very high level. We have also the added advantage of having a few spaces that we have said, no, we're not interested in using AI in these ways right now, because those are higher risk. And in conversations with the legislature and then following the federal executive order, like those are high risk. We don't want to touch those right now. So let's look at these three priorities for how AI is going to be applied. And let's also look at, avoiding some of those other areas. So we've kind of expanded the federal guidelines saying that automated decisions need to be transient and reversible. And then in the federal guidelines, there's a set of domain areas that are considered higher risk, basically things that affect justice outcomes, things that affect housing, things that affect eligibility. So like avoiding areas where we might be affecting eligibility or someone's access to housing or finances or anything like that. And focusing on places on these three allows us to gain some experience and have some focus in our work and keep things moving forward and some priority. Go ahead, Henry.
So, on that, I just lost my train of thought there. I had something, but when we talk about some of these things about not focusing on and focusing on, I think in your other slide, you had something about don't create new capabilities for government, but in this one, your top priority is interact with state government. So just, is that, help me understand, is that just, you're just showing us kind of a storyline and those things aren't still in play, or how does that necessarily work?
The don't create capabilities is the one that I have to explain the most often. And that's what happens when you try to boil something down into like 5 words. That's much more complicated. The idea there is that we don't want to, at this stage, be creating like whole new lines of business that we just couldn't do before using AI. We want to focus on, and I've got some other thoughts about this that might make it clear. Here we go. This idea of power tools, right? We want to give our state employees power tools for doing their job better. We don't want to create whole new types of job using AI. So like that's the nuance there. And I think from the perspective of making it easier for Vermonters to interact with government, it's a lot of like we already have all these, we have over 1,000 apps, right? Like we already have a zillion interfaces out there where Vermonters can interact with us. Let's lower the barrier to entry, lower the amount of upfront work they have to do before they can be successful applying to our human services programs or our whatever.
Well, I'm stealing that one, Josiah, because I like the way you described it, because I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're just trying to make whatever we're doing today better and more efficient, for sure. So I like that. And so that helped me remember my question, though. Sorry for the redirect. But when you talked about automated decision making and the transient and reversible stuff, what about the decision support that's already going on today that is kind of making decisions? Michigan comes to mind, and their unemployment insurance and those kind of things. So I mean, we have machine learning or decision support that maybe gets a little overzealous. Are you guys attacking those things as well, or is that just part of just making sure you don't make those same mistakes, I guess?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And I think one of the things that our legislature did, I think following the EU, was they used the language of automated decision systems. And when you follow that back through the statute, it boils down to algorithm. And I have a picture of that here somewhere, but yeah, here we go. Yeah, any algorithm. So yeah, there's a lot of legacy stuff in place. Again, we're trying to take that approach of what's a power tool, right? Like the robot can't make a decision, but the robot as a power tool could surface the information and maybe a recommendation to a person to take the decision. One of the things we talked about in the operational guidance, though, was there should be an adequate level of built-in friction so that we avoid the kind of mass deny or mass approve that tends to get us into trouble. So you want to have a skilled operator be able to use a tool effectively. But you don't want to have kind of I think ProPublica did a story early last year about doctors doing mass denials at an insurance company, like 500 on a screen. That is not appropriate for government, at least in our view. Maybe Georgia will have a different opinion, but in our view, that wouldn't be appropriate. And so we're steering clear of that type of thing. And really, that power tool idea works well.
No, I like that explanation, Josiah. Thank you.
One other thing I'll throw out. I know we are kind of getting to end of time, but we have, and I think I've shared this with Nikhil, and I'm happy to drop it in chat here. ATARC did a really good ontology of categories of things you should think about in an AI policy. And so what we did we basically just used this as our framework for the ethics policy. Started up here with ethics and kind of went through all of these categories and clumped some together and split some apart. But basically, it was this category. What was super helpful was having a standard set of definitions here, because even if you know a lot about AI, being able to differentiate between confidentiality and privacy is not something that like I can just do off the top of my head. So having somebody who's already kind of thought through this and we could use these as a starting point was super helpful. And then when you get to operations, right, like these are the things you need to think about on the operations side. And this was largely, again, the framework that we followed. We fleshed out the stuff in our ethics policy and then kind of worked on these categories in operations. We're still working on some of these bottom ones, the procurement side. That'll probably be coming out later this year. We'll have addressed all of these. But this was super helpful. I'll drop the link in chat and recommend that you use this resource. I guess one other, maybe I'll end with this one. This idea, again, of power tools, fleshing this out, they're used by people who have some level of training, right? When you give somebody a power tool, you assume that they have some level of training or experience with the tool. They know that you use a drill the way that he's using it in this picture. You don't use it as a hammer, and you don't try to use it to cut through wood, right? Like you don't like put a hole saw on the end of that thing and that'd be a bad idea. So you assume someone with a level of experience. And you also expect that they're using it in the context of a socio-technical process. So we're not looking at the paradigm of human in the loop. We're trying to avoid that type of language in Vermont. Instead, we're trying to say that there's a skilled operator of the system who's using the system to achieve a particular outcome. And then the other one there on the left, human-centered, that recognizes the dignity and value of all persons and their contributions to society. That's very, good Vermont speak. But the point there is that enables us to see the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, not just for the public good and like efficiency and saving taxpayers money and better outcomes and fraud detection and all those things. Those are all things, yes, we want to achieve, but also that focus on increasing the joy that our employees have in doing their work, making their work better. There's a lot of examples, and Stanford has done a great job of documenting a lot of these, where AI systems are implemented and they make the work much worse for the people doing the work. And with some small kind of user experience adjustments, which usually boil down to making sure that the operator has autonomy in the socio-technical process. Like if you take that approach, you can have much better outcomes, and you can actually make work better and make work more human. So with my team, I differentiate between human work and robot work. And I tell my team to focus on like the robot work, yes, automate it. The human work is the stuff where like your personality, your touch, your interaction with them, like the reason that you're working for me is because you have some level of soft skills, and I expect that you can interact with people and make their day better. Don't automate that part. And if you think back to ticketing systems and why ticketing systems feel heartless, often it's because we get that balance wrong. We automate the pieces where we want the human touch, and we leave manual the pieces that maybe we should automate. So we have lots of experience with this type of thing as technologists. We've got lots of lessons that we've learned, and AI is not really all that different. There are some differences, and we should focus on those and get that figured out. But I think over the long run, eventually systems are just going to be AI systems, and we're going to start looking at the algorithms and the outcomes as a part of how we implement, how we procure, and how we measure success. So, all right, I'll leave it there, but I'm happy to answer more questions if that's useful.
That was really very accurate and wonderful. Thank you so much, Josiah. I want to see if there are any questions. I have a couple, but I'll hold on to them.
I'll just say thank you. I apologize, I'm losing my voice, so I won't talk too long. But I just wanted to say thank you. It's always, it's so interesting to kind of see the ethical aspect of kind of what your approach is like. I agree with Henry. I like the power tool analogy. That makes sense. I think our biggest challenge has been how do you know, some of those definitions you talked about, like the AI should have this. Nobody knows how to do that though. You know, like, so our researchers are telling us, well, you say things like bias and you have a definition there, right? That the AI should not have this, but any of the data that already exists has that. And so they're having a really difficult time with implementation of like, you know, it's kind of like, okay, you guys, it's nice to say that, but the resources we have to pull in, we didn't create them. And this is where we're at now. Particularly, we've got some in our justice system that our criminal justice faculty are working with and saying, well, the challenge with that, Rose, is that the data sets that already exist in our infrastructure, you know, at a GBI level and other levels that they're pulling from have some of that. So, you know, I think our challenge is how do we tell them to operate in this way and in a way that might not have already been operating in that way. Like they weren't built with these that we're now trying to apply to them. So that's one of the challenges that we've had is just this kickback of like, hey, Rose, this is really nice, but it's pretty superficial when we talk about our approach and the ethics. So I was just going to say, have you gotten any of that? And how have you guys addressed that?
So I will say that nobody is that far down this path yet. You know, contrary to what you might hear from some vendors, like everybody is still figuring this out. The way that we're looking at it is kind of two-pronged. One is during the design of the system, you want to put reasonable safeguards in place, right? So you want to like look at the data and see if there is known biases in it, which there are, right? So you want to be upfront about what those are, and then as you're implementing, and this is all part of that first one, right? The design and implementation, I think, is one big bucket. As you're implementing, put controls upstream and downstream of where the AI step is in that process to ensure that you're mitigating that bias, right? It becomes a risk mitigation exercise, which we know how to do, right? You put them in before the step, you put them in after the step, wherever you need them. If you know that the system tends to fail on things that look this way, right? Through your hopefully robust testing protocol, then you make sure that there's an extra level of human scrutiny after, or that is somehow flagged that like this is a known failure mode for this system. Again, that comes back to that adequate level of friction built in. The second part of that is a little bit like the conversation around self-driving cars. Does the self-driving car have to drive perfectly all the time, or does it just have to be better than a person? And the answer is probably it just has to be better than a person for it to actually be saving lives. So, so what we are looking at in that case is monitoring outcomes. And it's very good and not always possible to have a baseline from before the system was implemented. And then even if you see bias coming out, you can compare to what was it like before we put the system in place. Is it to the point where we need to go back to the old way of doing things, right? The human manual way of doing things, which sometimes it could be. And we've, I think in our first inventory, we kind of laid this out. Sometimes it might be better to go back to the old way of doing things. Sometimes it's enough to just add another check, another control, either upstream or downstream, to check on that type of thing. So that ongoing monitoring, I think NIST has talked about it quite a lot. But I think in kind of vendor presentations, it doesn't tend to land. They don't tend to talk about that very much. So that's something that we're regularly pushing for is, yeah, monitoring. Like, how are we doing that? How are we monitoring both the outputs and then also the outcomes of the system? Because we need both.
Yeah. Yeah, and for our group, we've also been trying to get them to focus on outcomes that they're not necessarily building it for. So they really kind of are like, well, Rose, that's not why we're building it. Yeah, but I think you have a responsibility to understand that that's how it'll be used.
Yeah.
So that's a difficult conversation as well.
So we've talked about having like a review process of the use case, and anytime you expand the population of users that's using it, or how the outputs are being used when either of those things happen. You need to redo that assessment and look at, are our outcome measures still adequate to cover this new expanded space?
Thank you, Josiah. I appreciate you being here today and presenting this.
No.
Josiah, can you talk a little more about your training efforts? Because that is definitely something that we feel like we need to keep going concurrently as things happen. We cannot wait until we have at least like a finalized governance draft before we start training, to your point of that spreadsheet of check with your supervisor. So what is that the supervisor probably knows a little more than the person who is actually implementing or using the AI system? That's just an example, but like I would love for just to learn like what your overall training strategy is and the efforts.
Yeah, so it's still something that we're working on, I'll say, but the most kind of successful training that I've done has been based on what I just dropped in chat, which is a really silly training. But what I wanted was to accomplish two things. One is to show people that the failure modes that AI systems fall into can still look really, really, really strong. And you can't trust the quality of the output as a proxy for like how good the idea is. Because the quality of the output will be great and the idea is going to be terrible. So in this example, if you scroll through it, we call soft serve up here, we call it a creamy. So if you're wondering what a creamy stand is, that's what it is. And so, yeah, what this does is it's suggesting that local dairy farms bring in non-dairy creamy mix to sell on the roadside. And like, this is at best a mediocre idea. Like, it's a pretty bad idea. But if you follow through that thread, that will make a very compelling argument that this is a good thing and that there are specific policy levers that Vermont state can pull and a convening function that Vermont can serve, and that it will drive up tourism. So the reason I take people through this is it's silly, and the whole thing is silly, and it teaches people that like just because it says it and it looks smart does not mean that it's a good idea. Okay, so that's one. But then also what I'll do is we'll kind of go through that example over like 15-20 minutes. And then we break up into small teams, and everybody kind of goes through those prompts with a policy idea they have, which are usually good ones, right? Because these are people who have been in government for a while. And they've got things that they've always wanted to work on and never had time to go like actually invest time in figuring out what would need to happen to make it work. So then we get back together at the end, and everybody like just shares their findings and what they learned. And I did this actually just last week, and we just had some floods in Vermont last summer. So our flood recovery guy was on a team with me, and he's like, wow, I spent 3 months writing this for FEMA, and ChatGPT just made it for me in about 10 minutes. And I was like, yeah, yep. So, there's a lesson learning there, right? That, plugging in, getting some of that framework, getting some of those outlines together, like this can really help them with it. It also shows them what it's not good at, which is localizing the idea, bringing in some of the unique context that's specific to your processes or your state. So I use that training quite a bit. And then, we've also put out those guidelines about what's okay, what isn't okay, when you need to cite it. And to supervisors, the guidance I give is around trust. So the main thing with using AI in government is maintaining trust of the people who we're interacting with, and ultimately trying to build up people's trust in the institutions of their government. So would using AI in this way damage that? And that's the rubric that I asked the supervisors to put things through. It's not technical. It's much more about, do you have oversight over what your employee is doing? And if they use it in this way, will it harm the reputation of the state? And if both those things they can answer, that it's good, then yeah, go for it. And I still, I'm around. The supervisors know to reach out to me if they have questions or ideas or can I do whatever. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I love that creamy example.
Come up and visit sometime and I'll buy you one. How's that?
Any more questions for Josiah?
I don't have any questions, just another thank you. Appreciate the insight. Josiah was very helpful. Certainly great perspectives on things, so certainly appreciate it. Give us a lot of food for thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And there are a few members attending an AWS event, so I think they're on mute, but definitely wanted to hear this. So I'm glad they were able to tune in. Cool. So yeah, Josiah, you're welcome to stay. I really wanted to kind of give this as much time as possible in today's meeting, and would love to have you look at like some of the other things that we are doing. So I'm just gonna switch back to my screen. Let's see if you can do you all see my screen? Okay. Awesome. So just wanted to circle back on some of the previous conversations that we have had. And as I mentioned earlier, you probably heard from Ian about just reviewing our existing AI, responsible AI standard. So what I wanted to really do was to kind of start out with that conversation where if you all have reviewed, and I understand some of you might not be able to talk today, so we can always work with you all offline on this. But if you all have not seen that email, happy to resend that. But really what my intention was is to bring that up again and use our collective knowledge of all the things happening today to see if we can actually revisit it and see if we can if we need a subset of standards, because we as GTA we have a larger AI responsible use policy, but then I was wondering, instead of having a standard, I am also working at this point and getting pretty close to a draft to share with everyone on a Gen AI standard. And that is something I kind of had recognized that cannot be just part of the overall standard. So I started work on that early on. But something what I saw within our existing responsible use standard was that there is some language around procurement of AI tools. And this is back when we were imagining a lot of vendors knocking on everyone's doors trying to kind of sell maybe certain AI friendly tools or AI tools as a add-on to some of the existing tools. So we wanted to kind of get ahead and put some procurement language in there. I'm also working with DOS in refining some of that, but I figured if it may be helpful to have a separate procurement standard specifically for AI. Then we have some language around bias mitigation. We have some language around disclosures. We have language around data. But really what I'm seeing more is just the need for having a specific focus on having some guidance around data protection and data privacy. Don't know about standard, but definitely some guidelines around training and reporting. Any violations of misuse of data of AI tools. And last but not the least, some language around audits and monitoring. So right now it's all grouped into this one giant standard. So we don't need to make all the decisions right now, but I just wanted to see if anyone had thoughts around breaking this into their individual standards. And then also, if possible, we would love to form certain working groups where we can put together a draft, and then individually, you all can work with Ian and me and Donna to finish that draft to the point where we bring it back to the larger council, and then present that, and then, you know, kind of finalize that and send it to Sean Zia's approval as a standard after having a final discussion here. So having said that, you know, I just wanted to kind of open this up for discussion. And also, Josiah, if you have any thoughts, feel free to jump in, because you all have done this already in Vermont. So if you see something where, you know, you probably want to like put your finger on, tip the scale on a certain topic or priority, feel free to do that. Yes, Ananias.
Yeah, so Nikhil, we started socializing the standard as we started looking at some of our contracts that were coming up for renewal for end of the fiscal year. Our complex systems, as well as some of our just regular SaaS-based, less complex systems, if you will. So I understand where you're going with maybe breaking out the Gen AI topic. So the two things that came up around the Gen AI was the concept around creating models versus training models, right? So I think presently the language says tools and systems. Again, I'm at the conference, so I'm going by memory here. Tools and systems that create models. So we had a long discussion, you know, with the vendor regarding training models, right? So the whole concept of Gen AI is about model evolution to the data. And I think Rose's point in terms of this, the source of the data in itself just having implicit bias or where it stands. So I think flushing that out a bit is feedback that could potentially help from just experience from that perspective. And then the other topic that came up with another vendor was around the testing aspect. I think it says quality engineering that cannot have an error, or I think the language says triggers an immediate response. So a response to do what, right? To remediate just a few areas to flesh out. So, but we've begun socializing, like I said, the standard in those topics. So we looked at it as obviously vendors, suppliers providing tools and platform and services from an AI perspective that may augment systems that we have, but also things that they may be doing internally as they develop their solutions.
That's really good. I would love to maybe do a offline chat and get to understand a little, you know, in depth of like all the things that you all spoke with your vendors. Thank you, Ananias. Yes, Josiah?
Yeah, so one thing on the generative AI standard, I think a big piece to sort out that I think will guide your decisioning there is figuring out where you want to land on transparency as a standard. And so do you want people to know that an AI was used in making a decision about them? And if so, how do you explain that? How do you explain, in Vermont, we've taken the approach of like describing what the inputs and outputs are when a decision is made. If you want to go that way, or if you don't want to go out that way, that can help to inform what requirements and what artifacts you need from vendors if they're implementing some sort of an AI tool. And then on the employee kind of responsible use piece of it, that will also inform like how do you want to handle citations and things like that. And I've got some templates for that. So, yeah, feel free to reach out. I think
cool. Sounds good. That reminds me, in that chart when I was looking at it, it kind of talked about like a certain percentage of usage. Is that something you rely on a tool to kind of gauge, or is this purely, I guess,
guidelines for the people using it? So if they kind of would look at the final output and be like, yeah, I used it kind of in the brainstorming outline part, but most of the content is mine. right? We would see that as around the kind of 25% mark. If it's like, yeah, about half the words there are robot words, about half the words there are my words, that'd be on the 50%. It's more of a kind of guideline for the
Makes
employee.
sense. Yep, yep. Sounds good. Any other thoughts around this? Any immediate yeah, Rose, as I saw you got off camera. Yeah.
Yeah, Josiah, and sorry, you guys, this is my only time to eat lunch, so I'm trying to discreetly eat that while we meet. Josiah, going to the training topic that Nikhil brought up, are you guys doing any kind of optional or mandated training with your government employees in Vermont on appropriate usage or data privacy?
We haven't yet. It is something that we've been talking about, and I think we're getting pretty close to it because we had I was actually having some discussions with our CISO today about that. So I think we'll be getting there. What I will probably do is roll it out as like one module in our security training that we require all employees to take. I'll do
Cybersecurity training?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Just
Yeah.
one comment, Nicole, just on the working groups, definitely like that idea. I think it's great that we break apart, get a chance to be a little creative or some ideas and then come back together. That's always been a very good way to collaborate and not be stuck and everybody trying to figure everything out. So definitely willing and happy to be a part of that if needed.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess what we will do is we will identify some of these swim lanes and then reach out to everyone and just, see where you all see your contribution and your expertise being applied to. I know Rose already has been working with us on the ethics DNA guide. So similarly, we'll do with something with this as well, and then individually reach out to everyone via email. Awesome, great. So yeah, just wanted to kind of go through a quick series of updates. The first one is for the Innovation Lab. We are currently in the process of putting together an RFQC, a request for qualified contractors, essentially all the emerging technology vendors that are going to be willing to collaborate with the state on pilots and proof of concepts. Also working with our GTA teams on refining the language and still trying to figure out like what is the perfect model of making sure that we help agencies, but also at the same time truly, watch out for them from a contracting perspective. So, working our procurement team and contracts team is working closely with us, including some of our technical teams as well. So pretty soon, once we have a draft, we will share that with everyone. I'm also trying to get someone externally, someone like a Gartner, to take a look at that RFQC language and see if we have any better way of presenting what we are looking for. And we're hoping to have that release sometime in June. So I would say, we will turn it around and reach out to you for a draft review sometime pretty soon. While we are doing that, we also have some work happening as far as our AI inventory is concerned. Some of you may know that GTA does an annual inventory of all the applications as part of the enterprise governance work. This time, we are also going to be reaching out in addition to that to be able to request any AI systems that are currently in place. And to Josiah's point earlier, like sometimes, we probably don't know because there have been things inserted into some of our existing systems. So we might not identify them as separate systems, but that's exactly kind of like where we are looking to partner with everyone in understanding like what do we qualify, and then if we are able to identify exactly where some of those decisions are happening, I think from a policy perspective, it would be important for us as a council to know what the overall footprint looks like of AI systems and what the landscape is. So that is some work that we are getting ready to do as part of the effort. And the last but not the least update, I know Rosie, you're eating, but if I can just bother you to give us like maybe just a quick, very high level update.
Yeah, so Ethics DNA is still moving forward. Dr. Catherine Baird, ethicist and co-founder of Ethics Game, has come on board. She's a member of our center. So we've been working diligently on that. We should have a draft to Nikhil in June, and then update this committee in the June 13th meeting, just to give you an idea of that and get your feedback. Dr. Baird is going to join us for that June 13th meeting as well, just here virtually to be able to ask any questions, take back feedback, and we'll keep working on it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Awesome. We're kind of getting close to the top of the hour. So want to open this for any open discussion, any more thoughts or anything that you want to suggest?
I was just going to mention, Nikhil, and I'm sure you already knew, but just for anybody that wasn't kind of following Utah, they did pass their law on AI on May 1st. So I know it's been in draft for a long time, but if you're interested to go out and see Utah's new AI law, you can easily find that now. They passed it May 1st.
Yeah, that is definitely interesting. That's like probably one of the first laws that got into effect early this month that has at least a starting point of holding the industry responsible as far as I guess mostly focused on disclosures.
Yeah, it is. And really for their, private industry, I don't know how much of it is relevant to their government in Utah. But I look forward to reading through all the details.
Awesome. All right, if nobody else has anything to add, I just wanted to thanks again, Josiah, for your time. It was very helpful. And I know you're doing this for several states. So again, wanted to get you as early as possible in our process of putting this council together and before the work truly gets into like much of a momentum. So thanks again, and I'll see you all in June.
Yep, thanks. I'll look
Thanks,
forward
everyone.
to it.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
good day.
Thanks for everyone's time. Bye.